Imagine this. You're shaking hands with your state's top prosecutor in your own kitchen when your HOA president kicks in your cabin door with a clipboard and a smile. What would you do if the person who's supposed to protect property values treated your home like a war zone? My name's Rex Holloway, and this starts on the edge of a cold blue lake in northern Michigan. I'd moved back into my late granddad's place after a rough divorce, looking for quiet, coffee, and maybe a couple dawns on the dock where the loons sing. The cabin sits on a slice of pine and sand he shaped with his own hands after the war. Cedar that still smells like sawdust when the sun warms it. Old stones stacked into a fire ring where he told me stories about stubborn people and how to outlast them. Turns out I'd need that lesson. 'Cause the HOA here, Lakeshore Pines Community Association, wasn't run by neighbors. It was ruled by Karen. Karen, mid-50s. Perfect posture. Iron slacks, sharp enough to open mail. She drove a spotless silver SUV with a magnetic sign that said HOA official, like she deputized herself. Clipboard welded to her palm, tape measure like a sword. If you sneeze too loud on a Sunday. She was on the porch, asking if your sneeze complied with section whatever. Subarticle, who cares? There's people who say power reveals character. In Karen's case, it revealed a bully who loved the sound of her own pen scratching out fines. The first time she came to my place, she handed me a courtesy notice, thick as a church bulletin. 47 violations. She chirped. Everything from dock length exceeds authorized footage, to unpermitted combustion structure, that was my granddad's fire ring, to non-approved mailbox color. Which, for the record, was a friendly robin's, egg blue. She tallied $500 in initial penalties, plus $75 per day until compliance. When I reminded her, my cabin had been here long before the HOA ever existed. She didn't blink. Previous ownership is irrelevant. Mr. Holloway, she said with that sweet tea smile. Compliance within 30 days. Or we record a lien. A line on my granddad's legacy. That night I drove, angry as a kicked hornet's nest, to the county building. I dug through old plats, dusty deed books, meeting minutes on microfilm, eyes burning, coffee cold. I found something I wasn't supposed to find, the membership consent page that supposedly included my granddad's signature. Only. My granddad passed on in late winter. The HOA's formation papers filed in early spring with a signature that looked wrong. Taller loops. Different slant. And the notarization line. It verified a date after he was buried. I mean, come on. I didn't say a word to Karen. Not yet. I started small cameras tucked under the eaves. A binder for every letter. And a habit of narrating my day, like I was leaving breadcrumbs for a future jury. Rex walking the property at noon. Nothing unusual. You know. The kind of boring record that's dynamite later. A week passed. At exactly 6:30 in the morning, Karen marched up my drive with a hired surveyor and a local shop owner who'd somehow become the HOA's compliance partner. They tromped through my yard like it was a crime scene. Peeking through my windows, yep. That happened, snapping pictures of the coffee mug in my sink. The surveyor, a nervous guy with a ball cap and a sunburn, whispered when Karen wasn't looking. She, told me to. You know, find stuff. Or make it look like you're off by a foot. He stared at his boots. I'm just trying to keep my business from going under. Man. Later that day, I learned he'd been stiffed by Karen on a prior job, and that the compliance partner had some financial trouble of his own. There was a pattern here: pressure the vulnerable, then point them like loaded darts. I called a property attorney in Grand Rapids named Stella Crawford. Steel in her eyes. Handshake, warm enough to melt winter. I laid it all out: the timing, the signatures, the morning rates, the fines. Stella stirred her coffee. Rex. Michigan law doesn't let an HOA conjure authority over property that predates its covenants without clear, valid consent. And forged consent. She raised an eyebrow. If what you found is real, this isn't just overreach. It's fraud. Document everything. We're gonna need patience and proof. So we built a plan. A calm, deliberate, un-Karen plan. Karen hates being ignored. So I ignored her. She responded with daily notes tucked in my door like love letters from a hall monitor. Trash can, not screened. Dock reflects sunlight at an angle that disturbs waterfowl. Grass exceeds approved blade length. I couldn't make it up if I tried. At 9 o'clock one night, I caught her crouched behind my lilac bush with a point and shoot, waiting for the motion light to flick on so she could photograph light pollution. I stepped onto the porch. Evening. She startled, then smoothed her hair. Routine inspection. Karen, I said. Routine implies a schedule. Her smile tightened. Compliance is constant. Around that time, I learned she'd told people at the diner that I was unstable and dangerous me. A quiet guy who fishes and repairs screen doors for his neighbors. That kind of talk isn't just gossip, it's poison. Martha, a widow down the lane with a garden that's older than half the houses here, whispered to me on a Sunday walk. She made me pull my climbing roses. Said they were non-native. My bill planted those. She blinked hard. Tom, a Marine who done tours downrange and who never shakes, shook when he said, she threatened to sue me over the flagpole. Said it was 3 inches too tall. 3. The pattern came into focus: go after the lonely, the grieving, the folks with no time or money to fight. Then came the money trail. Stella filed a narrow public records request. Nothing dramatic. Just a look at the HOA's annual financials. When they finally coughed them up, the reserve account looked light. There was a line for management services paid to a company with a shiny name that didn't seem to manage anything. The owner of that company, Karen. The amount over several seasons, $67,000. I stared at the ledger, sick to my stomach. If it was what it looked like embezzlement, there were neighbors choosing between medicine and fines while she wrote checks to herself. We didn't go to the news. Not yet. We went to the neighbors. I knocked on doors. Slow and respectful. I'm building a record. I told them, if you've got letters, bring copies. If you've got receipts, bring those too. And if you've got stories, tell them. Folks came out of the woodwork. A young couple with twin girls had been fined because their kids drew chalk hopscotch on the driveway. A retiree had been billed for stormwater management after Karen's landscaper broke his gutter. A teacher got dinged for the wrong hue of porch light. It felt like a tax on living. That's when local Channel 11 rolled up. Because Karen called them first. She wanted a segment about a problem homeowner endangering a peaceful community. Lights. Camera. Karen's pity smile. I invited the reporter in. Sat them at my granddad's table. Poured coffee. Laid out documents in tidy stacks. The questionable signatures. The financials. The letters. The timestamps on the security footage. I'm not perfect. I said on camera. I mow a day late sometimes. But what's happening here isn't about grass. It's about control. The story aired that night, and the narrative didn't go the way Karen planned. It wasn't menace on the lake. It was neighbors speak out. The phones at the station lit up. Folks from across the county told eerily similar stories about rule books used like cudgels. Within 2 days, an investigator from the state attorney general's office called Stella. We'd like to talk. Karen doubled down. She slid a note under my door that said I'd threatened her. Which, sorry, was nonsense. She tried to bribe the county inspector. The guy recorded her, and then drove straight to Stella. She even paid a teenager $50 and a lie to leave an oil stain by my dock, and then called the county about an environmental hazard. My cameras caught the kid. The county guy took one whiff and said, "That's motor oil from a lawnmower. Not a spill." He gave me a look that said, "Hang on. You're not the problem here." Stella's binder grew to 2 binders. Then 3. Every page numbered. Every photo logged. Every allegation sourced. One morning, I pulled down my granddad's old footlocker to look for a bundle of letters he'd written my grandma. In the bottom, under a flag, and a faded Polaroid of him and me, with a stringer of bluegill. I found the original deed. The legal description ran longer than a baseball lineup. I traced it with my finger. The metes and bounds put our right-hand boundary well past the line Karen had posted on the HOA's map past it. In fact, into the corner, where she'd built her prized rose garden, and a gazebo that hosted her summer compliance socials. I sat back, heart thudding. If the deed was right, her favorite place to sip lemonade and scold people, on my land. Stella smiled just a little when I showed her. Rex. If we were writing a novel, I'd tell you this scene was too on the nose. She put on reading glasses and checked the chain of title. This is the real thing. Original. Properly recorded. Clean. Do we tell her? We tell the Attorney General. The AG's office bumped our meeting forward. The morning they came out to the lake, I brewed a fresh pot, set out every binder like it was a little army, and took a breath that tasted like pine and nerves. The lead investigator, a calm woman with a voice like a judge who has seen every trick and isn't impressed, asked me to walk her through the story, from the first knock to the last letter. I did. I tried to keep my voice level. I probably said more than once when I reached the part about the forged signature. 'Cause it still made me shaky. She nodded, took notes, asked precise questions. Then, the universe delivered the most on-brand entrance in HOA history. The door didn't knock. It swung wide hard, and in marched Karen. Clip-clop. Tape measure dangling. Eyes bright, like a cat that dragged home a bird. Immediate compliance inspection. She announced. Not even looking up. Mr. Holloway. Per section. She stopped when she saw the investigator's badge. "Ma'am," the investigator said, not unkindly. "You just entered without consent." Karen blinked. Recalculating in real time. "Open door," she said. "Too fast. Routine inspection." The investigator's face didn't change. "Please wait outside." Karen drew herself tall. Chin set. "I'm the president of this association. And I'm here from the Attorney General's office." the investigator said. We're reviewing allegations of forged documents, fraudulent billing, and harassment. If you would step outside, we'll be with you shortly. She said it like you might say, please put the rake down, to a neighbor who's about to scratch a new car. Karen looked at me. For the first time since this started, I saw fear in her eyes. Not the fear of being wrong, the fear of getting caught. She left without speaking. That afternoon, the state pulled HOA bank records. They saw what we saw. They saw more. There were transfers to Karen's management company precisely when the reserve fund should have been growing. There were vendor payments that didn't match work performed, like shoreline remediation billed in late autumn when the lake was frozen. There were legal consultations with an out-of-state firm that didn't exist. You don't need a law degree to know when numbers smell off. Meanwhile, neighbors kept coming forward. A Vietnam vet who'd kept quiet for years handed me a folder of letters that would make you week fines for an unauthorized memorial flag. Threats of accelerated penalties. A photo of a small plant by his wife's headstone, labeled illegal ornamentation. I mean, who does that? A single mom described Karen showing up while she was bathing her toddler, pressing the doorbell again and again to discuss your compliance plan. A retired nurse said Karen had parked outside her window for entire afternoons. Watching, she whispered, like a hawk. We created a potluck of truth at my cabin. People brought casseroles and copies. I cleared the fishing rods off the wall and hung a big paper map of the neighborhood. Red pins, where folks had been fined. Blue pins, where folks had been harassed. Yellow pins, where money moved. The map lit up like a carnival. Tom stood back and said, softly, "This looks like a campaign." He was right. It was. Karen didn't stop. She couldn't. People like that don't know how to disengage. They only know how to escalate. She filed a police report claiming I'd brandished military skills. The deputy patient man, steady eyes, watched my footage, closed the folder, and said, "Keep your cameras on, Mr. Holloway." She tried to turn my ex-wife against me with stories that I was unstable. She offered a small grant to a teenager if he could document violations around my place. She called the mortgage company of a neighbor through a relative who worked at a bank and inquired whether late fines might constitute a default under the deed of trust. Who wakes up and chooses that? When the investigator reached out to schedule a formal sit-down with the association board, Karen sent an email to the community declaring the AG visit fake news and me a bully. The email bounced around like a pinball. And then Dale, the tire shop owner, who'd been Karen's compliance buddy, forwarded a reply I'll never forget. "Karen," he wrote, "I can't do this anymore. The papers were sketchy from day one. You told me to look the other way. That's on me. I'm done." You could feel the wind shift. The formal meeting at my place felt like the end of a very long winter. The investigator returned with a quiet colleague who carried a laptop and a scanner. Stella sat to my left. Karen arrived with 2 board members who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Plus a man in a cheap suit who introduced himself as counsel and then refused to give a card. We started with the basics. Chain of title. Founding documents. Votes and quorums and consents. The investigator asked for the originals. "We'll provide," Karen said. We have some of those." Her voice wobbled. "Great," the investigator said. "We've already obtained copies from the county. They don't match." The room went quiet except for the lake tapping the dock. Next came the finances. The investigator placed a stack of bank statements on the table and traced the arc of transfers with a pen. Funds moved to an entity you control. Invoices created by the same computer that sent the board minutes. Checks written to cash. She spoke without heat. No flourishes. Just facts. Do you have an explanation? Karen's mouth opened and closed. The cheap suit lawyer started to say something about management fees. But Stella slid a page across the table that showed the management company was formed after several of the payments were already made. The dates did not care about his speech. And one more thing, Stella said. Voice, gentle as a lake breeze. Boundaries. I placed my granddad's deed on the table like a solemn offering. This cabin predates your association, I said. These lines are the true lines. I tapped the map. Your rose garden and gazebo, those sit on my land. Karen went white. The cheap suit lawyer squinted. That can't be right. It is, the investigator said, looking at her colleague's laptop. The county records match. The survey on file with the HOA shifted the boundary. It should not have. We didn't yell. We didn't gloat. The room didn't need our drama, it had enough of its own. The next morning before sunrise, actually marked cars rolled down our lane. I watched from the porch, with coffee going cold in my hand. Quiet knock at Karen's door. A conversation that was mostly nods. Two people walked out with their heads down. That afternoon, an order arrived from a judge suspending the board's authority while the state completed its work. No more midnight inspections. No more gotcha fines. No more compliance socials in a gazebo that didn't belong to them. Neighbors exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The aftermath wasn't fireworks, it was repair. Martha put fresh soil in the flower bed where her roses used to climb and, with Tom's help, built a small trellis shaped like a heart. The young couple handed their twins sticks of pastel chalk. And the girls drew a long wobbly rainbow across the driveway while we clapped. The Vietnam vet, quiet man, hands like baseball mitts, raised a new flag on a stout pole. And the whole lane stood still for a minute as it snapped in the breeze. The teacher swapped her porch bulb back to the warm hue she liked, and laughed when the dusk fell pure and simple. My cabin changed. 2. The old fire ring earned back its evenings. We turned that infamous rose garden, the one on my side of the line, into a community compost pile that fed Martha's new memorial bed. The Rex Defense coffee can at the hardware store, that's what folks had called it, when they chipped in for legal bills, became the seed money for a lakeside retreat day for veterans. Tom leads the fishing. Martha handles potato salad like a general. I mend rods and make sure nobody falls off the dock when they're laughing too hard. Sometimes, when the light goes long and the water is flat as glass, I think about power and paperwork. About bullies with badges they wrote themselves. About folks who were told to be small and quiet and compliant. And I think about my granddad's hands, steady on the tiller, showing me how to keep the bow straight when the wind tries to spin you. You don't win by shouting at the lake, he'd say. You win by knowing where the shore really is. We didn't set out to win. We set out to tell the truth and to draw honest lines. To say no without screaming. To remind each other that a neighborhood is not a set of penalties, it's a set of people. And I know that sounds corny, but after living through Karen's rule book circus, ordinary kindness felt like fireworks. Karen, She's not a villain in my mouth anymore. She's just a cautionary tale about what happens when one person confuses authority with worth. There's accountability working its way through the system. Slow and steady, like spring melt, feeding the river. That part's not my story to narrate. My story is coffee on the dock at sunrise. It's Martha's new roses curling up a trellis. It's Tom teaching a kid to tie a clinch knot. It's the sound of laughter where there used to be a clipboard. If you're living a version of what we lived, if your HOA thinks the fine book is a sledgehammer and you're just a nail, hear me, you are not alone. Start a binder. Install the camera. Learn the difference between the rules and the law. Knock on your neighbor's door with a plate of brownies and say, "Tell me everything." Find the original lines. Stand where you're allowed to stand. And when the wind kicks up, keep your chin at the horizon and steer. Okay. Your turn. What would you do if your HOA president burst into your home while you were talking to the Attorney General? Anyone else had an HOA try to run your life like this? Drop your story down in the comments. Let me hear it, because you never know. Your words might be the hand someone else needs to hold when the clipboard brigade comes marching up their drive.